morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mastering Apsis series for marketing automation, your core nurturing flows. As you can see from this slide, we've had a ongoing series for starting end of last year, and now we have actually added a bonus episode on insights in April. So make sure to sign up for that one too. But let's get to today's topic. Great. So we are talking about core nurturing flows today. My name is Opri Westerinen. I'm the Director of Sales and Operation here for Apsis at Effici, and I have here my colleague Christina.
Hello, everybody. This is Christina.
Yes, and Christina is responsible of our professional services team for Apsis. So we are here to talk more about marketing automation and flows in general. What we will cover today, we will cover several things. First of all, how to build and activate nurturing flows, how to create triggers based on behavior and lifecycle stages, how to discover proven nurturing scenarios and when to deploy them, and of course, how to measure performance optimize over time. So quite naturally, if we move forward, we will have the key takeaways. So how to design your customer journeys, how to build them, and how to track the performance. So that's what we want you guys to go leave today's session with. We will first talk a little bit more on the theoretical part. What is nurturing? What type of flows you can create? And after that, Christina will showcase you how to do basic flows in Apsis 1. We will share the recording afterwards. So we have around 30 minutes for the presentation. And if we run a little bit over time, you can, of course, drop off because you might have something else to do. And then you can review the questions as an example later on. But let's get into it then. Nurturing. So nurturing is a process where you engage with your contacts with the right content and touch points over time, and you guide them towards the desired actions, right? So usually when we talk about nurturing, we talk about lead nurturing, meaning we will have a prospect coming on a website. We want to convert them to a client. However, nurturing is something that you can do also for your existing clients or your existing members or whatever type of a business you are in. Why we do this is because more portion of contacts are actually ready to act immediately, meaning that you cannot make them purchase something right away. When we are looking at some of the statistics, we are looking at 25%, which is, in my opinion, is quite high, but only 25% is ready to buy right away. So that means that you need to have different type of actions to be able to nurture those contacts and drive them to make the correct, drive them to the decisions that you want them to make. So nurturing is actually a strategic decision to keep contacts interested, informed, and guide them towards their next step when they are ready. And this could be, of course, as we talked earlier, it could be about purchase, upgrading, renewing, deepening engagement. It could be anything, right? So it doesn't have to always lead to a purchase. And of course, all of the actions that we are taking on the customer lifecycle should, or in our nurture strategies, should increase our conversion rates across the customer lifecycle. So when we are looking at the common lead nurturing tactics, we have drip campaigns, which are quite often used. So in here, I have several different examples and different type of triggers. But Christina, in your opinion, because you've done a lot of marketing automation implementations, what are the most common drip campaigns or your favorite drip campaigns to start with?
Well, I would say anything that has to do with welcome on board, welcome flows, onboarding flows. So that's where you have kind of you get those conversions because you're reaching out to the subscribers or the members or the profiles when they're the most interested ones. So you have those high open rates, you have the high click-through rates coming in because the timing is there and also the relevance is there. So consider like the new subscribers signing up. We have new product users, or we have new members coming in. So that's a great way to start kind of building the trust with them.
Yes, so basically anything that is based on an action that the end user is doing is
Yes.
a good way to start the flows. Yes, I agree. So in here, I think what Christina just mentioned was the new member onboarding, member benefits activation. So after someone becomes a customer, you could also use community and networking series based on, for example, event participations or webinars, as you are in one now. You might get something afterwards, right, from us. And then, of course, you could have something which is based on another type of an activity like course or service completion. And then, of course, the purpose is a little bit different based on in what part of the customer journey the customer or the prospect or the member or whoever you want to call them is on. Let's move to the next part, which is the content marketing workflow. So, and in here we have a different type of things, and I think most common ones is the free toolkits and materials, so which is based on a form submission on the website as an example. So you can have a lot of different type of content that will build your thought leadership and the trust to your products or your brand or your company or whatever it is, right? And then I think what we sometimes overlook is the multi-channel content series. So for example, you could use a trigger after opportunity is created where you can support the purchase decision in the sales funnel. So based on an opportunity that is created, okay, they are interested in buying a specific type of a product from us, how marketing can actually, based on that, nurture the prospect to actually be confident making the decision. Of course, you can also have touch points that are not email or SMS. It could be also that the sales is contacting the client. So you can you don't have to limit the thinking when you're thinking about your nurturing flows to only the digital touch points like website visits or email sendouts or SMSs. You can also utilize client meetings, sales outreach, and so forth in the nurturing plan that you are building. And then we have the personalized follow-ups. So what I already mentioned, for example, based on the website behavior. So those are usually a little bit higher on the funnel, meaning that you can have people coming to the website. We might know who they are. If you're using our website script, you would be able to identify the person who is viewing a certain part of the website. And you can send out information about it, about that area to the prospect or customer. I think we used a long time ago an example, but I really like it, which is based on a kind of a boutique style of a shop who was selling lamps. So you know, when somebody's buying a design lamp, they actually also want to know, like, okay, where I should place it, how I should place it, how it should look like, how on a table, what type of a lamp it should have. So what they were doing is that when they see someone actually reviewing lamps, but not yet putting anything to the cart, but still actually actively looking, they send out a guide. This is how you make a decision. These are the things that you should take into consideration when you make the purchase, right? So thinking about it from the client perspective, what type of information they need to be able to push slightly further in your sales funnel. And then another one where the lead hits activity threshold. So what you can do in Apsis 1 is you can use segments to group different type of actions. So if you haven't seen the previous segmentation webinar, go and check it out because it will go more in depth how to build segments. But you can do a combination, and with that combination, you can, for example, send an internal notification directly to your sales rep to contact the customer once they've done a certain amount of activities on the website, form submissions, response data, whatever it is that makes sense in your business context. So to kind of tie it together, balance your nurture tactics. and it lead nurturing covers activities in all part of the purchase funnel or the customer journey. And sometimes these activities also overlap each other, right? So quite often I hear that people are afraid to send too many emails or being too much in contact with the clients. But it's only actually rarely that I see that we are too much in contact with our customers, right? So I encourage to be a little bit adventurous in here. As long as your content is relevant and it is something that the customer wants, you should definitely quote unquote bombard them with that information. So you can always look at the results, and Christina will talk about that a little bit later also, but you can always review what is happening. Do you get unsubscriptions? Do you get spam complaints or whatever it is? If you do not have that, that is usually an indication that you are not sending too many emails, right? So you can use those soft KPIs to measure, like, okay, are we sending too much information or not? So I encourage to send rather too much than too little. And then effective lead nurturing strategy uses a mix of different tactics, right? As we just went through. So utilize different channels, email, SMS, website, sales outreach, events, webinars, whatever it is. Do not think it only as a only digital touch points. You can use also physical touch points in the lead nurturing strategy. And the layered journey, of course, with different type of touch points is desirable. And then, of course, monitor performance of each activity over time and optimize the performance based on the KPIs that you have added to those flows or to the strategy itself. Great. And then before we move to Christina's part, couple of things still why to do this. So we used actually all of this in the segmentation webinar, but I think this is just makes sense also in this context, right? So what you want is more engagement from your customers. So the personalization boosts the engagement, right? So if we are sending information to our customers in real time when they're making the action, and I think the easiest way to explain this is the form submit. If I want to download a handbook and I download submit the form, I should get the email or I should be able to forward to the handbook right away. It's natural that the personalization is high. However, it could be also something else like date-based flows. So let's say that someone becomes a member, as we said, and after that we start a onboarding journey. On those, we usually see very high open rates. Then the relevancy, as I just talked about. Of course, if you have the personalization, you have the relevancy. So that will naturally, and you have the content, so that will naturally have a higher open rates, click rates, desired actions, and so forth, because you are sending the information when the customer wants it. So it's a 101. I think everybody has heard it many times, but I don't think it's a bad idea to kind of repeat it again. Like, why do we do also behavioral based triggers and action based triggers versus only doing newsletter campaign marketing? Both of them has the place, but why do we see the better engagement is because of the personalization, the relevancy of the content and the timing. But Christina, let's move into the marketing automation in Apsis 1.
Yeah, thank you, Opri. So a bit more practical on this side of the webinar. So we're going to have a look at marketing automation, the tool, some features that we're using. But as with all the marketing automation flows, before we start to actually build something, we have a few other pointers to kind of look at. So one thing is, of course, asking those questions. So if we have a marketing automation flow that we want to build, what is going to trigger the flow? So in this case, always consider what data are we supposed to use? What data do we have? Is it in the right format? And so on. And then also, who are we targeting? So about the personalization that Opry mentioned, that we want to know who the subscribers and profiles are. So look into what kind of information do we have about them, and also where's the consent related to those subscribers. And then not to mention the goal of the flow. So this could be as simple as, well, we just want to get maybe new product users to log into the platform that they're going to start using. We might just want to get some kind of action out of this. If you have numbers, we want to have a specific open rate, click-through rate. That's even better to have that as a KPI. But always kind of consider the goal, so to have it cleared out or clarified so that it doesn't become too complex when you start to build. And then maybe the fourth bullet in this case, the naming and structuring of flows. This is more for scalability. So if you have one flow, it's easy just to kind of see, well, this is the flow that I'm working with. But as soon as you start to grow and you start to add multiple flows into the platform, then the naming becomes so much more important, so that you understand what kind of flows am I working with, and what are we kind of using. And a tip for people who start to build the flows, do some sketching. That's always a good thing, to just have a piece of paper and just kind of visualize how you want the flow to look, and then see if there's any kind of touch points you want to add, or any kind of conditions you want to look at, and so on. So sketching is also nice.
Pen and paper
apart
is
from
good.
Yes, exactly. And I would also say, then apart from the questions, there are some things to also be a bit wary of. So if we have a look at the next slide, we can see these mistakes to avoid. So one thing is the over automation, where we try to really automate every touch point, every available touch point that we can consider, where we try to trigger emails for every single behavior. So this is where we start to kind of maybe build too complex flows that we don't understand. Why do we have this part? Why do we have this step in this flow? Why have we divided it into these specific branches? So the over automation is something to kind of start simple and then optimize as you go along, and then try not to over automate. Then we also have the too many emails, too little value. So in this case, again, sending emails is not the issue, but the issue is that if you're sending a lot of emails with the same message across different channels, across different flows, that's when you will start to kind of lose the engagement of the subscribers and profiles. So this is something to have in mind, I would say, to just make sure that every time you're sending those emails, even if you're sending a lot of emails, make sure that the relevance is always there, and that you're not kind of just copying something that is used all around the place. Yeah. Then the static flows that never get reviewed. So this is also that when you're creating marketing automation flows, really create them and go back to them. So look into optimization, look into how the flows are actually working. So these sort of build and forget, where you build a flow and then you just leave it as is. That's where you get those kind of troubles, that you might have outdated content. So you might have links that don't lead anywhere anymore. You might have discount codes that aren't used anymore. And then also make sure that there's a clear owner. So when you start with your marketing automation flows, who is going to revisit the flows? Who is going to work with optimization and follow up? So that's also really, really important. And then treating everyone the same. So there's not a one size fits all. So here again, we go back to personalization, that try not to build a flow based on a customer journey where you're trying to kind of get the entire audience into the flow, but really kind of focus on, this is the specific audience that I'm targeting with this specific flow. Again, not to make it too complex, because again, people will not want to receive the same time of information if they're in different parts of the customer journey. So that's also a key thing here. And so work with segmentation, as we've talked about, and then also just with the segments, try not to focus too much on the demographic part of the segmentation, but focus on the behavior, as Opri also mentioned before, that there's a lot of behavioral data that can be utilized. So
a bit too quick with my fingers, so let's get to the next one.
No worries. So the roadmap to get started. So this is, again, if you're a new user, like just getting started with marketing automation, or if you're already working with some flows, I think this is a good kind of roadmap to follow. That always start with mapping your life cycle. So the actual journey that a person takes when they are in contact with you. So that's the first thing. And then identify your top 3 triggers. So think of this as, okay, so where are my golden opportunities? So when do I have people like raising their hand, wanting to ask a question? Maybe that's the perfect time when I should actually be sending an email to communicate about that question instead. So identifying those top 3 triggers comes as the next part. And then maybe you don't want to act on all of those 3 triggers. Maybe start with just one of them. So build that first flow to kind of get you started. So yeah, that would be the next thing to kind of consider. And that's the easy part, actually, building the flow in marketing automation in Apsis 1. So all of the thinking, that's where you need to kind of put the effort in, I would say. And then, as I said, going back to not forgetting about the marketing automation flows that you have already kind of set up, review and improve. So if you have these flows already created, if you feel that I'm actually in that category of creating and forgetting, maybe as a task after this webinar, go back to the flows that you've created and do a bit of reviewing to see how the flows are actually working. So let's take a look at our example. So we talked about some good drip campaigns, and I mentioned welcome journeys or welcome campaigns. And also in this case, we're going to focus a bit more on the new member onboarding. So here again, just sketching out what do we want to do? Well, we want to communicate with our new members. So we need to have some kind of trigger that is related to the membership being activated. And then we have the purpose. So what do we want the marketing automation flow to actually do? So we want to drive that early engagement, highlight benefits, work with adoption, and maybe also make sure that the members can connect with other members. So the community connection comes in as well. So the communication in these flows usually consists of the following stages, where you have that kind of welcome and orientation that we start with. Then we move forward to the guidance and how to do things. And then we have the role-based content. So in this case, really focusing on who am I communicating with? Am I sending the right kind of content to the different people based on the behavior and actions that they've taken so far? So that's kind of the starting point for us. And I would say next up, let's start to do some building. So in Apsis 1, when we start to kind of build our flow, we have a very easy create flow button where we can start to then choose the canvas and templates that we want to work with. So I'm going to name this just new member onboarding. And then I'm going to choose my section where I have my members. And then I'm moving forward to the actual canvas. So what we see here is the listen node. So what's going to trigger this actual flow that I'm building? So if it is a new member, we maybe get a signal outside of Apsis 1 telling us that we have a new member. So we have some real-time events that we can work with. So in this case, we will have a custom event sent in called new member. So we can then trigger these flows based on that signal coming in from outside of Apsis 1. So usually this is where we might have an API, for instance, involved. However, we could also work with other types of data, like an attribute data based on membership started date. So do we have a date when the kind of membership gets activated? And based on that date, when should we trigger the flow? So in this case, we might want to say, let's just trigger this one day after the date. So one day after the membership gets activated at, let's take 12 o'clock. Then we'll trigger this marketing automation flow. And apart from the setting in the listen node, we also have some regular flow settings. So we can also look at, okay, how many times should a person or profile enter the flow? So this also depends on the flow that we're building. So we'll just add once for this specific flow, and then we go back to the where do I have my members, where do I have the consent. So here I'm actually just choosing, okay, so this is the subscription that I have, and then I have my members set. All right, so a quick view on the flow settings and getting started, but I think the focus is also kind of talking more about the listen node that we have. So I gave you some 2 examples. Real-time event, we have those custom events coming in, signaling that we have a new member, but we could also work with those daily triggers. So in this case, I would say that, again, depending on the flow that you're building, we need to kind of look into where is the data and what am I going to use. But I would like to ask Opri in this case. So I would say, in your opinion, what are the most common triggers that our customers are working with?
I think the 2 easiest one is the form submit. And for that, you get the data already in Apsis if you're using our forms. So every time someone submits a form, you can start a flow. So that is a very easy and kind of a trouble-free way to start to explore automation. And the other one that you just said was the date-based flows. And that is actually quite easy because sometimes it could be, it's very hard to add data via API or whatever it is, but we can use, as an example, scheduled file import to add data from our main or core system, where we have, for example, start date of the customer or contract, or we have the membership start date. And once we get that data in, it's very easy for us to build flows around the dates. So those 2, of course, are easy, but also very effective way to start with marketing automation.
And that's right. We actually have, if we are clicking one way forward, I actually agree. We have the form and page interactions here. So having those form signups and just being able to send one welcome email is quite easy to do in Apsis 1 without just having any APIs or other things coming in the way. So you have the data and you can kind of act on that data just by using Apsis 1. Another point, actually, if you click once more, we have the response data. So again, taking actions based on opens and clicks, but also bounces. So me and Opri had the discussion about this the other day, that, you know, having those internal marketing automation flows is also a great way just to get the information. So even if you're not communicating with your subscribers and profiles or members, you can still get internal notification based on things that is going on with the profile engagement and so on. So looking at the who has received 3 hard bounces, meaning I cannot communicate with these profiles anymore, that would be a great way to kind of have an internal marketing automation flow set up.
Yes, you could either tag them, or you could also, if it's an important client, notify the salesperson to see who is actually the new contact person, as an example.
Exactly. So what about then the next part? So let's start to continue, or let's continue building our flow. So we have our new members and I want to communicate with them. So I want to send them an email. So I'm just going to add one email step here and just connect it to my listen node. And maybe I even want to do a series. Maybe it's not one email I want to send. I want to do a series of multiple emails. I'll just continue and drag these sort of email nodes to my flow. And then now I have the 3 here that I can work with. And I don't want to send them at the same time. So I'm going to use a time node with a bit of a countdown just to make sure that I'm not sending all of the 3 emails at the same time, as I mentioned. So let's just wait 1 week here and let's send this email. Why not take 1 o'clock? Yeah, that's fine. And there we go. And then I'm gonna twist it. Okay, I'll twist it around like this. I have my next email coming in, and I want to put another time node in between these 2. So I'll just go ahead and add a timer here. Let's wait for 3 weeks in this case and proceed at, we could take, maybe we'll change it to 3 o'clock. Yeah, let's take 3 o'clock instead. And then remember just to connect the different steps. And maybe this is it. So I'll just add, just for my own sake, an exit flow, that the flow ends here, and then we're done. But we could also maybe do a bit more of a personalization here. So this is really, really nice that you can work with segmentation, and you can kind of personalize the flow also based on behavior. So let's say that I want to send the first email to everybody, but based on how they interact with that email, I might want to, okay, let's see what happened there. Oh, did it? Oh, that was strange.
Yeah, it went to the next one. Let me see if I can go. I think it's...
Yes. There we go. So for some reason, it
Yes.
just jumped.
Yeah.
So for the personalization part, what we can also do is that we can actually, based on the behavior from the first email, we can add a check profile so that we wait 1 week, and then once that week has passed, we check if the profile has, for instance, clicked in the email. Maybe there was a login link to the platform, or maybe there was something that we wanted the new member to do. So then what we can do to personalize the flow a bit more is to actually have a bit more branching coming. So we can say that everybody who clicked will receive 1 email, and the members who did not click will actually receive another email. So let's just add another email step here. There we go. And now we started to kind of work a bit more with a more personalized flow in this case. And as with the segmentation and everything else, like the emails in this flow, you can work with the same kind of dynamic content and segment the content in those too. So it's that's available here as well. All right, so we have our flow. Let's move on to the next slide then and have a look at the different nodes that we had. So there are quite a lot of things that you can do in the marketing automation flow that you're building. And as we saw in the example, we have the timer and the check profile. So if you click once more, Opry, I want to just highlight that these were the ones that were used. However, if we click once more, there is another node called wait for event that I was actually hoping that Opry could tell a bit more about, like what would be the difference and when would we use like the combination of check profile and time node versus wait for event.
Yeah, so if you want to check a segment or something like this, then you would use the check profile and timer node combination, right? So it could be also something that is outside of the actions that the profile has taken, right? You might want to check, as an example, in a lead flow, if that profile became a client during the time that you were waiting, right? Whereas with the wait for event, we are actually waiting something to happen, and after that, we are moving the profile right away to the next step. So let's say we wait for event for 7 days, and it could be a click. So when someone clicks, we will move them right away to the next node. Whereas with the check profile and timer, everybody's waiting in the timer the same amount, and then we check it. So there is a slight difference in here when you want to use the check profile and timer, and when you want to actually wait for a specific action to happen. So sometimes you need to be quick after something, and then you want to send the email right away when the action happens. And in some of the cases, you want to wait for things to happen, and then usually you use a time and a check profile. Both are very effective in their own rights.
I think we can just move on. I'll show you a bit of a more finalized version. So in this case, we had the flow, but we also can see here that we have finalized like the different steps. So in the emails, we have added also the content that we want to work with. And this is now an activated marketing automation flow. So everything is set, and now we can have the flow work on its own. But again, going back to, we need to revisit and review and optimize. So if we click on the next slide, let's have a look at what to measure and optimize. So one thing is that we have different types of performance that we can look into. So one thing is the flow level performance. So how is the flow actually working? Are the right profiles entering the flow, or are profiles getting stuck somewhere? So we can focus on that, and we have a slide showing you where you can kind of track this in Apsis 1. Then when it comes to the message level performance, that's about the email. So how effective are our emails? Did we actually reach our profiles? And the content, is it interesting enough so that it's worth kind of engaging in? Do we get those opens? Do we get those clicks? So that's what we can track here. And then for the audience and behavior performance, this is then more over time, like what's the engagement? How does it look like? Do we have specific campaigns on certain times, which makes a lot more like profiles entering the flow and taking the next step instead of just waiting on us to kind of remind them to do something. So this is also something that we can kind of look into. So the marketing automation report, now this is an example of the flow we just created. So we don't have that much data coming in, but as soon as we have activated the flow, and if we click again, Opry, we will start to see kind of the tracking part. So we can follow how many people start in the flow, how many people are active in the flow, how many completed the flow, and so on. So this data can show you over time, based on a time interval of choice, how the flow is actually doing. So if you see that the engagement is falling, then we might need to do a revisit and see, is this flow actually working as intended? Other things we can look at is the node stats. So again, going back to the flow that we created, we don't have that much activity going on here yet. But we can see for each step that we have, how many people kind of entered the node, how many completed the node, how many are still in the node. For the time node, for instance, if we say that there's a waiting time for 1 week, you would stay in that node for 1 week. And then you can also see if somebody exited the node at this specific step, or if a profile was deleted while in a specific node. So the node stats are also great to kind of track to see the entire kind of process of the activities. And then one final thing, email statistics. So in the email node, you can of course see just what we went through, but you also get an overview of the email stats. So we can see how many emails have been sent, delivered, opened, clicked. And there's also a full email report that you can access to kind of see who has opened, what has somebody clicked on, just as with your regular bulk sendings. And if you want to investigate further, I want to highlight the segment tool. So we talked about this in the last webinar. Opry mentioned it as well. We can base different conditions and add them into a segment to kind of review the trend of the engagement, for instance. So there's a lot more things to do if you're even working in the segment tool and doing some investigation. All right. I think that kind of covers it for the review and revisiting flows and what you can kind of look at.
Yes,
So
and we are tiny bit over time. I want to thank everybody. I can see that we have questions in here. So Christina, I could ask you a question in here, which is actually quite nice. So if the flow is just one welcome email after newsletter sign up, would you still recommend segmentation?
It depends on what you're communicating about. So again, if it's a welcome email after a sign up, what kind of information has the person added into the sign up? Is it just email address and then just adding and getting the consent to receive emails? Then there's not that much to segment on. So I would kind of think about, okay, what's the most important thing for this person to actually receive in the email, and kind of keep it on a more general basis. But of course, if you have a form where you're asking a lot more detailed questions, maybe you've even said that the sign up for should be connected to that you're signing up for different types of newsletters, then you could have different welcome emails be sent to those subscribers in that case. So
Yes.
depending on the form, I would say.
Thank you. And we have also a question regarding the section. Let's see if we have time to take it. Can you please explain more on the section you just selected to start the automation with?
Yes, so sections in Apsis 1, this entirely depends on the account structure that you have. So you could just have the one section. In my example that we showed today, I have my own kind of demoing account. So I have a lot of different sections that I've created, and that's why I had a long list of sections to choose from. But if you just have the one section, then you don't need to kind of pick that section from the list, that you will just have the one there. But this is usually relates to, again, the account structure and how customers want to kind of divide their data in their audience. So that's where sections come in. So it depends on the customer and your own account. Mm.
Yes, and I want to take we just got a third question in, and I really like it, so I want to ask it still. So at what time would you recommend sending out the emails in a flow when we want people to engage? So like when you added the clock in between, so this is there is no right or wrong, well, there probably is a wrong answer, but there is not a specific answer that we can give. But Christine, I want you to elaborate a little bit, like, okay, how long we should wait in between the emails that we are sending to have the engagement, high enough engagement.
Yeah, I would also say that, as Opri mentioned, this really depends on your own kind of audience and who you're communicating with. Uh, for the welcome flow, don't wait too long. So if we have the series of emails that I just sent, what do you want the person to kind of act on in the first email? And if it's a product user, I would rather send the second email a bit sooner than later if they haven't logged into the system, for instance. So it really depends on the flow that you have. And then as for timing, we have some ground rules. Don't send anything midnight or late in the evenings at least. So this is also something to consider, that when do you expect that the person you're communicating with is actually in front of their computer and is actually working with, if it's a new member, for instance. So when are they actually acting with you and not working, for instance. So it really depends on the flow. Yeah, and try not to, I would say, send it together with other types of information at the same time. So spread it out a bit more so that a person doesn't receive like multiple emails the same day, the same time, but do a bit of calculating on that as well. Mm. What about
Thank
you,
you,
Opri?
Chris.
You've also had some customer cases related to this.
Yeah, I think as long as you have relevant content, I would send them actually quite short span, especially with the newsletter signups or the membership or whatever it is, because the customer is actually engaged at that time, right? There is a reason to communicate to that profile. So, for example, adding like 4 weeks in between, in my opinion, is too long, because if you have the content that is relevant and we want them to know about it, I think you can use shorter periods of time, and then you can maybe if you have like 5 emails towards the end, you can have a slightly longer waiting time. So let's say you can move to 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but in the first month or so, I would send actually quite a lot of emails, especially if you don't send out a lot of email campaigns or newsletters. So let's say you have someone signing up and you send an email once per quarter, and you happen to just send the email the day before, the person who just informed you, like, I want something from you guys, I want your newsletters, and then you wait for 3 months before you send the next newsletter. So I think in those cases, I would utilize the action or the engagement that is coming from the customer. So there's not like a right or wrong answer, as I said before, but there are some things that I would always take into consideration. And in this case, especially with those actions which are where we can see a high engagement from the client, I would definitely utilize that and try to send as much information as possible, but spread out in a good way and not putting too much content in one email. So that's a quick answer, Christina, to your counterable to me.
Thank you, Opri.
I think
All right.
we are done. Very good questions. I'm actually very
Yeah.
happy about them. They were very nice ones. I think we are going to wish everybody a very nice weekend.
Yes.
If you Yes, and if you have any questions, please reach out to us either through our client relations / support team, or with your account manager. Yeah. I think
Sounds
that's
good.
it.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Thank you,
Yay.
everyone.